Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the house today with Aaron Quinonez. How are you doing today, man?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me
It's
on.
fantastic. Just to give a little bit of context, Aaron is a Marine combat veteran, served with the 1st Anglico, and founder of Q Missions. Has won an award from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Cairo 7 for the Hometown Hero Award. You've done so much, man, and I'm really excited to dive into what you've been doing. I know you're based out of Auburn right now, right? Doing some amazing things for vets and starting to expand into everybody dealing with trauma. It's a very exciting proposition of what you've got going on here. And you've got a book coming too. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the book is basically the culmination of all my experiences up until this point. It started out as just a guidebook that I used to help veterans deal with trauma and overcome the experiences they've had in war. And so I take guys with my nonprofit to Mexico, and in 2 days we build a home for a homeless family. Yeah. And I use this book as a guide to help them learn all the lessons that I've learned over the last 10 years. Right. And through the process of doing this, God showed me that there was that I could help a lot more people than just veterans with this book. That trauma is trauma. Yeah. No matter how you experienced it, all your traumas might be different, but the results are always the same. Totally. The depression, the anxiety, the suicidal ideations, the drug abuse and alcohol, it all has the same result. And so I've learned over the last few years that this doesn't just help veterans, but it can help the general public as well. So we decided to publish the book to see if we can help even more people, even outside the veteran community.
That's amazing. And I know there's been a lot of studies. I track, what the St. John Hopkins Institute Research Facility is doing and all kinds of other stuff that's really driven towards how people deal with trauma and PTSD. And that has been a lot of the results lately coming out is trauma's trauma. It doesn't matter if it's DV related or combat related or they were robbed in a Walmart parking lot. They're seeing, when you really look at the MRI map of what's going on in that space, they're actually more similar than people think. And I think the general populace thinks, well, PTSD from combat is its own category. And don't get me wrong. I mean, there's, there are some unique factors that come with that for sure. But man, there's just been so much that's happening in that space, and so I'm really happy to see you kind of expand. I know you've helped so many vets, and I know there's so many more people that can help from that. Before we dive too deep into this, though, I'd love to hear your origin story. Where were you born? How'd you grow up? What kind of kid were you? I want to know the real nuts and bolts of what brought you to this point right now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in the mountains in Northern California.
Nice.
In a small little mountain town on Highway 36 called Mad River.
Nice.
And it's right on the Humboldt-Trinity County line. So I know some of you guys, your ears are perking up right now.
Ooh, Humboldt.
Yeah, Humboldt County, right? Like that's where all the marijuana originated from here on the West Coast. And so it's absolutely true. I grew up, my parents were marijuana farmers. And that was back when it was in the Wild West.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've literally watched that industry go from the Wild West to Main Street.
Right.
And I've experienced that firsthand. So it's been really unique perspective for me watching that whole thing happen.
It's a whole different world.
It's a whole different world. And so when I grew up on in this little tiny community, I think the graduating class for 1997 was 8 students. Okay, so a really small town.
Yeah.
When I grew up out there, so there's the town of Mad River, and then there's what they call the Green Gate. And then past the Green Gate is called 8 Mile.
Nice.
And it's 8 miles from the Green Gate to the end of the world. Like there's nothing else out there but wilderness. Yep. And so that's where this community of marijuana farmers lived, was past the Green Gate.
Right.
And had a big lock on it. Nobody went past the Green Gate
right.
Unless you lived past there. The sheriff wouldn't even go back there. It's a true story. I mean, he would just hang a note on the gate that said, come see me when you come out.
We need to chat. Yeah.
That's how I grew up, was in the Wild
crazy.
West, really. I saw some crazy things as a kid.
I can imagine. Well, and in the 90s too, I mean, what a time to be alive in the first place, right?
Right. And I learned, there was a lot of loggers there, and then there's very few of the kind of hippie, pot farmers that were there.
Right.
There was not a good mix. And so going to school was tough because you had these, redneck logger kids that would always pick on you. And
totally.
I had long hair because that's what everybody did where I lived. So I get picked on a lot, and I learned how to fight
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah.
And so that transitioned me into the military,
Yeah.
being able to, I had that history of being a smaller guy.
Yeah.
And
Taking the fight.
That's right. When I would join the Marines, I was 120 pounds.
Whew.
You know, and
Jeez.
so I didn't notice at the time, but people look at me like, "What are you doing here?"
Right.
So, but I grew up really tough, and in the military, it's a lot about hardship and being able to adapt and overcome hardship.
So true.
How I grew up was a hardship. I didn't have running water in
Right.
my house or power. We lived in a little cabin that my dad had built. We had a wood stove, and that was our main source of heat, and we would cook on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
To get water in, we had a spring that we dug out, and we piped that into the house.
Dang.
Just one 1-inch black hose. We'd fill up a bathtub, heat that water on the stove, or the wood stove, and then that's how we would take a bath. I mean, so we would hunt for our food, canned foods, because when we get snowed in the winter, I mean, you were there, and you weren't getting out for months.
That's right.
So I grew up like that. So going in the military wasn't as hard of a transition for me as it was for some of the other guys who grew up in the city.
Part of the process.
Yeah, they hadn't experienced that. So
100%.
I did very well in there.
Yeah.
It wasn't as much of a hardship as it was for some of the other guys because where I had come from was so much more difficult to survive than the military. I'm like, I got a warm bed and a blanket, and they feed me 3 times a day. Like, what are you complaining about?
At me,
Yeah,
it's
easy.
It's so funny to talk about that though, because I remember my experiences through basic training, and you could tell within the first 10 seconds who had never even thought about the military before, and they've been coddled a little bit. I don't want to call them snowflakes, but these guys are coming in and they're losing their mind because somebody's in their face yelling at them, telling them they did something wrong or they're not performing right, and they're, oh my God, I'm having to do push-ups. You could tell that they were just losing their mind. And then there were other guys who did have that kind of experience in some way, whether they were a military brat or they had been in some kind of junior ROTC or they had some kind of prep. But I'm so bullish on this mentality that adversity is what causes success and really launches you into a whole. It just prepares you. Anyway, sorry, go on.
No. That's perfect. That's perfect. I'm of the same mindset.
Yeah.
And so I tell people that, because I work in ministry a lot. I'm very involved in my church.
Sure.
And so people will come in who are new believers who are like, I want to serve somewhere. I don't know what God's calling me to. I said, well, look for your pain, and there your ministry will be also.
Yeah.
Because who better to lead somebody through that experience?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
I've got that T-shirt. Follow me. Absolutely.
So many people shy away from things that have caused them pain in the past.
So true.
And if they would just face those fears and overcome those fears, then they can lead the next person through it as well.
Yeah.
And so that's all I do with my program with Q Missions. We've won multiple awards.
Right.
I don't have a college degree. I'm not some psychologist. I just show people the path that I've taken, and had success. And I say, hey, avoid these things because these are pitfalls.
Right.
And guys who've had great success just doing what I've done. It's not some grand program that was in this think tank that they created, with all these guys with PhDs and things like that. That's not what's helping guys.
Formulated on the ground.
That's right.
This is what's real. And we talk about it in the military all the time. How many times did you get orders while you were in a combat situation from somebody who wasn't even close? They weren't even probably in that country giving you orders. And then when you call back to say, hey, this doesn't make sense, there's nobody on the other line.
That's right.
Execute without question. And it's like, I boots on the ground. I'm looking at the situation. This doesn't make sense. That frustrated the crap out of me.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of pouring back into the community.
Absolutely.
And it's the basis of my program and the basis of the book that I wrote, which is healing through service. There's healing through serving other people, and that's what God showed me. And I spent 7 years on the mission field, never thinking that I'd be doing anything like this.
Yeah.
Just I went to Mexico the first time. I built a house for a homeless family.
Yeah.
And something really changed inside of my heart, and I was like, wow, this is different. And then I need more of this. So I went back to my church. I said, where else are you going? What else are you doing? And they got me connected with the missions director. And I spent 7 years traveling all over the world.
Yeah.
I've been to Haiti, Honduras, South Africa, Cape Town, Swaziland, Kenya, Malawi, the Philippines, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And I'm building churches and schools and orphanages. I'm digging wells. I'm teaching. I'm pouring into the community.
Yeah.
But it's healing me. There's healing in that. And so that's just a program I developed for myself, never intending to
Right.
lead anybody else and not wanting
Yeah.
to either.
Yeah, right.
When God called me to do it, I said, no, I'm not interested in this.
Right.
This is not for me. And I was really disobedient in that for a few months.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine, Jason Royer, I served in Anglica with him.
Yeah.
He went off the grid.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, man, I said, all right, God, his death doesn't have to be the catalyst
Yeah.
for me to start leading other veterans through this program. I'll do it regardless. But I didn't have the money.
Yeah.
You know, it cost me about $20,000 to take a team
Sure.
of 15 guys down through this program. And I didn't have the money. But I had a really nice fishing boat.
Yeah.
So I sold my fishing boat
Oh, man.
to pay for that first trip.
Yeah.
3 days later, they found Jason. He had checked himself into a
Wow.
VA hospital, inpatient treatment.
Wow.
And so I couldn't turn back then, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're locked in now.
So I continued with the sale of the boat, and I led my first team down there
Yeah.
on Veterans Day of that year, and it's 4 years ago. And man, I never looked back. I watched those guys go through that program, and I watched the healing. And there's a great video on YouTube that you can watch that
Nice.
shows that very first trip
Yeah.
and taking those guys through, and you can see the pain and the anguish on their face and in their voice. And you can watch that just melt away as they go through this process. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
It's amazing.
And then that's what started the first edition of the book, which was just a small little guidebook for
Right.
these guys to teach them to go through the process. And that's evolved into the book that's going to be published here in the
Right.
spring,
Right.
which is Healing Through Service. And that is even more of an evolution because
Right.
it's written to the military and to veterans, but I rewrote it in a way that it applies to everybody. So anybody could pick up this book
Right.
and gain some knowledge out of it. Anybody can pick it up and learn this process of healing through service to help them overcome the trauma they've experienced.
It's
Because
huge.
we've all experienced trauma.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
one of my favorite lines, and it's been overused a million times, but I'm going to use it again anyway.
Yeah.
It's from Black Hawk Down.
Nice.
You know, and the master sergeant, he's there, and they're going through the convoy, and they're getting all shot up.
Yep.
And they halt the convoy, and he gets out, and he goes to the lead vehicle to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Why are we stopped? And sees that the driver was hit, so they pull him out, and put him in the back, and he
Right.
tells the A driver, like, "Hey, you need to start driving."
Yep.
It's like, "Well, I'm shot." And the master sergeant says, "Well, we're
We're
all
all
shot.
shot.
Get in there and drive." And
Right.
so that's us. That applies
Yeah.
to everybody in this world. We've all experienced some sort of hurt and pain and trauma. But
Yeah.
if we stay there, we lose. And we
Yeah.
know that in a firefight, right? Like if
Yep.
we're getting hit and we're getting pinned down,
Not coming back.
you've
Yeah.
got to move. If you stay pinned down,
Yeah.
you're done.
Yeah.
You've got to move. You've got to move forward. You've got to advance.
To give a little bit of context, I always, especially when we have vets on the show, there's so many different kinds of jobs in the military. I did want to dive briefly into what you did in the Marines,
Okay.
just for context.
Yeah, sure,
right?
sure. So yeah, most people think First Anglico, they've never heard of that. Like,
Right.
what is that?
Yeah.
Even Marines, they're like, I've kind of heard of you guys, but I don't really know what you do.
It's more of a legend.
Yeah, we kind of like it that way.
Yeah, right.
Honestly, it's not like we're not like the Navy SEALs. We don't
Right.
make movies about ourselves,
Yeah,
things
right,
like that. But basically, Anglico, it's the Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. And so, what does that mean? Well, basically, we're all master parachutists. We'll parachute in, and we'll call in air, artillery, mortars, naval gunfire. We control all the air assets on the battlefield, and so we can do that in a couple of ways. When we do it with a 6-man team, 6 to 8-man team. We'll parachute in or we'll hike in. And we'll control the air assets. Now, a lot of times we do that in conjunction with other special forces that are on the ground. So we'll support like an Army Rangers
Right.
if they're going to do like a high value extraction or something like that. Or,
Yep.
we'll go in and we'll do like an interdiction mission where we'll soften up a target, and then the SEALs will go in the other side,
Yep, yep.
just as a diversion. So we do things like that. We also control air for them.
Yeah.
If they've got air assets coming in, we'll suppress the artillery or the anti-air so they can get
Yep.
their birds in and out. So we control all of those things. We can work independently just on our own missions. We can work with other special forces groups. We work sometimes with other Army or Marine Corps units, infantry units, where
Yeah.
we can soften targets for them.
Yeah.
And that's where they'll just take a couple of us and attach us to that unit, which has
Right.
happened to me before.
Sure.
And so we just work with them to help their mission to control the air assets. We're what we call force multiplier.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So
And
when
a
you,
big one too.
yeah, when you bring us onto the battlefield, I mean, we can bring down, we call it lightning from the sky and thunder from the sea, because we can put massive amounts of munitions on a target.
Right.
Or we can do a strategic hit with like a GBU or something like that, laser guided munition, where we need to hit one specific target.
Right.
So the capabilities are really robust when you've got an Anglico team on your side.
It's amazing. Where did you get the pleasure of deploying to?
So I went to Iraq in 2003, right when the war first kicked off. So before there was like the subway and the Baskin Robbins and stuff like that we have now. You know, the green zone. I'm like, what green zone? There was one zone, and it was the desert. You know, brown zone.
Blows my mind.
So I was there. The bases weren't even like built up. What they did is they took big D9 cats and they just pushed up these big berms. So we didn't have the big giant sandbags they have now.
Talking about like the HESCO barriers?
Right, yeah, we didn't have those. It was just these D9 cats that were pushing up sand and making this big berm, you know, that was as wide as it was tall, and that was really it. And those were traditional camps where we would be there for, you know, just a few weeks, and then they would move a forward element up, start building another one, and then move the main body, and just keep pushing up.
No, 3. I mean, it was hot. Where were you at in Iraq?
So we went from Kuwait, and we went all the way up through Al Nasiriyah, and then a portion of the element went into Baghdad.
Okay.
And then they pulled a bunch of us back because everybody was getting sick. And I remember news reports later, they said, oh, yeah, well, we just wanted to push forward to see, to show them that we could do it, like a show of force.
Sure.
And then we pulled back. And I just remember thinking, like, everybody was sicker than a dog.
Right.
Because we had cut power and everything to that area. And so I'm not going to speak for them and say why they did it. But
and it's already a third world country.
Yeah, from my vantage point, I mean, everybody was like, they call it the crud.
Yeah.
Everybody, it was like the flu.
Yeah.
But really bad. So
unfamiliar.
Yeah, you just couldn't, you were combat ineffective at that point. So they pulled us all back and tried to get everybody well.
That's interesting.
But it was just like a flu or something that everybody got. It was crazy, but it was
a dirty place.
It was a dirty place. Yeah.
Been there, done that. I've got that T-shirt, brother. Interesting. So, I mean, as somebody who served also, I really want to talk about what you're doing in the veteran space. You know, I spend a lot of my time in focusing on vets that deal with PTSD and guys that are homeless, which typically those are combined in a lot of the cases that we see. And you know, we still have such stupid high numbers with suicide. It's a toxic number, and they're just staggering in a huge way. And you've really picked up a baton and you're running with it in some really big ways. So tell me about Operation Restore Hope. Tell me about Q Missions, and especially tell me about Operation Pop Smoke.
Okay, absolutely. So Q Missions is the nonprofit. So we're registered 501c3, and originally, like, I didn't go to choose that name or anything like that. Q Missions was a 501c3 that I created, and it was just a way for me to take money from my company, put it in a nonprofit that could pay for me to go on these missions, to go, you know, build a church
to cover overhead,
so
flights and
it was an easy way for me to do that. Instead of, you know, it going directly to the church and then them doing it, it can go to my nonprofit, which then can pay for my airfare and my travel. So that's how we originally designed it. And then the Facebook page was just a way for me to be able to connect with people overseas that I didn't really want to have my own personal Facebook page or my own personal information. Because sometimes you work in some really dangerous areas like in Haiti, and you don't want those people to actually have access to who you are. You know, OPSEC, right? And so that stuff doesn't...
That's a real thing.
Right. So that stuff stuck with me. So I created that. Originally, Q Missions is just a way for people to see what we were doing, you know, my friends and family to see what we were doing and connect with other missionaries or other people I met out there doing this work. And then when God called me to lead other veterans, we already had that built. So we said, why change the system? You know, this will just be a small little thing. It'll be nothing, and it just is what it is, you know. But boy, was I wrong. So that's how we stuck with the name Q Missions, just because that was... You know, I was Sergeant Q in the military, and everybody calls me Q. And so, like I said, originally it was not a lot of thought went into it. That's just what it was, and it stuck.
It fits.
Yeah, so that's Q Missions. And so what we do, everything we do is an operation.
Yeah.
So we have Operation Restore Hope, Operation Hope Cambodia, Operation Kenya.
Love it.
So we have these different operations that we do all over the world.
Yeah.
But where we've gotten all of our awards and the program that's basically our flagship is Operation Restore Hope.
Yeah.
And that's where I take 15 to 20 guys down to Mexico, and in 2 days we build a home for a homeless family.
Wow.
And I teach them that despite their disabilities, they can still make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And that there's healing through serving others and through serving God.
Right.
And I teach from the book that I wrote, and so they get that. I really encourage them to bring their spouse with them, because I can't just heal the veteran. I've got to heal the family.
Yeah,
it's a
right.
family unit. And so a lot of times all the time, when guys go on deployment, they go on deployment and their wife stays at home.
That's right.
And so during that time period, two completely different experiences.
Right.
And so when they come back together, they clash because two totally different experiences.
Right.
But when I can bring them both on the mission field together, they get to have that shared experience.
Context
they get to
matters there. Yeah.
So the bonds that you built in when you were in Iraq, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So the bonds you built there are stronger than any other bonds.
Absolutely. Yeah. No question.
Because you have that shared experience. You've had that. You've overcome those obstacles together and that hardship together.
Nobody could possibly understand without being there. It's just what it is.
That's right.
Nobody will ever understand. Yeah.
So we recreate that in Mexico.
So big.
And with the husband and wife.
Yep.
And it's so powerful because they get that unique bonding experience together. And one really unique thing that I didn't think about, it just happened. It was a happy accident, I guess. I mean, God always knew, but I didn't know until I got there. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So when we bring them there, a lot of times the spouse, and it doesn't have to be a wife, it can be a husband, because I have a lot of female veterans that go through. But the spouse, they see their veteran at their worst, when they're depressed, when they're angry, when they're suicidal, when they can't get out of bed in the morning. They see them at their worst. And so when they get to go on mission and they see these guys building that camaraderie with the other veterans, laughing, joking, on mission, accomplishing things, motivated, it blows them away. And the spouses are like, wow, this is the person that I married. This is the person I remember. So amazing to watch that happen. And it happens every single trip. To watch that happen. And I'm just so blessed that I get to watch that. I tell people I don't really do much. I just get people down there, and then I let God do the rest. you know. And so, like I said, I'm not a smart guy. I'm a janitor by trade.
Right.
And so I just try and be obedient to what God called me to. And it's amazing to watch the transformation that happens with these people as they go through this process of healing through service, through Operation Restore Hope.
Right.
One of the I guess I'll mention it here. I usually keep this back. I don't tell a lot of people, but every home that we build in honor of one of our fallen brothers.
Amazing.
And so,
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
We don't publicize it a whole lot.
Sure.
But we bring the Gold Star family with us.
That's amazing.
And they get to work right alongside us. And they're in a squad. So when we go, I break everybody into squads. They have a squad leader, somebody who's gone before, who teaches. And so we run it just like a quasi-military
Absolutely,
operation. Reminding these guys of things that they already know and have experienced. So I don't teach them anything new. I just teach them how to repurpose what they learned in the military to be successful as a civilian. So by bringing the Gold Star family, it's amazing to watch what happens with that family, because more often than not, they know how their loved one died. Yeah. But they really don't know how they lived. Yeah. And something I didn't realize until I was going through the process. And God was showing me this as well, that when they get to come, they get to experience that camaraderie. They get to see, the trash talk that happens between guys. They get to see how motivated they are and how they get things done. Right. And so for them, it's so empowering, because now they feel like they're part of that. They feel like they get to kind of peek behind the curtain and see how their loved one lived, and not just know how they died.
I never even thought of that. That's huge.
I didn't think of it either.
Huge.
I didn't go into this thinking like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to be great. It's just something
I'm going to help
did.
families.
Yeah, it's just something we did, and I was like, oh, hey, that makes sense. That's,
It's such a huge impact. Yeah.
I take no credit for any of that stuff. That's just something that God had, and I just had to walk in obedience. Right. And there it was. And so it's been amazing to watch that happen.
Absolutely.
So that's Q Missions, and that's Operation Restore Hope. Now, from there, that's our boot camp. Everybody has to go through that process first, and then they can qualify to go to Cambodia, Kenya. We're going to be going to Panama in 2020.
Nice.
We're also looking at going back to Brazil, and we built a church on the Amazon River, which was super
Nice.
cool.
That would have been sweet. Yeah.
It was amazing time.
Yeah.
So doing things like that throughout the year. But in order to do that, there's two things you have to do. One, you have to successfully complete Operation Restore Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, you have to be serving somewhere in the community.
Nice.
It doesn't have to be with my organization.
Sure.
It can be anywhere.
Just somewhere.
You have to report those hours to our volunteer coordinator.
Yeah.
And she verifies them. And then when I'm looking to build a team,
Yeah.
that's one of the main things I look at. I'll put it out there on our alumni page. Hey, this is where we're going. This is the briefing, the mission briefing.
Yep.
Guys will say, hey, I want to do it. The very first thing I do is I look at their volunteer hours.
What else are you doing?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
It's not just, I'm going to get to go on this trip.
Right.
It's you've got to be serving somewhere else, because I have to be mindful of my donors' money,
Of course.
because they pay for these guys to go.
Yeah.
And so an average trip costs about $3,000
Yep.
to take these guys wherever we go.
Right.
I make them pay for their plane ticket, and that's it. Everything else is covered through donations.
Right.
So I don't want these guys chasing that high
Right.
and just going on
Right.
mission and then crashing when they come back, and going on mission and crashing
It's
when
like
they come
fake
back.
motivation.
That's-
There's a lot of that going around right now.
That's right. So
Yeah.
they've got to make it a lifestyle. If
Yeah.
they want the healing and they want it to last,
Yeah.
it's got to be a lifestyle. If you want to go to the gym and get gains,
Right.
you don't go every quarter and work out really hard for a day.
You can't think about doing push-ups and get strong. Yeah,
No,
that's
you've
right.
got to be doing
That's
it
right.
every single day. And so a big part of in the book, I talk about structure, routine, and discipline, which is
Yeah.
what we learn in the military.
That's right.
Create the structure around whatever problem this is. You create the structure. Then you start a routine to do it every day. And then you have to have the discipline
Right.
to follow it through. And we see that going back to the gym analysis, right?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
see gym memberships skyrocket in January. Everybody's going to get
course.
fit. But by March, there ain't nobody in there but the gym rats.
It's a running joke.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's just the gym. We do that with everything else in our life too. People want to change their life, but they don't want to change the way they're living.
Yeah.
And, it's these small little things every day that you can change and be disciplined at. That's going to give you gains no matter what area you're putting it, applying it
100%.
to. So I tell people there's a simple formula for success.
Yeah.
It's consistency plus time.
Yeah.
You apply that to anything in your life, and I guarantee you're going to have success.
I can't remember who said it, but there's a quote that I quote all the time. I should probably look that up. But it's greatness is a lot of small things done well.
Yeah, I agree.
So many people are swinging for the fence every time. They're looking for the home run, when if they just focused on getting on base 5 times, they'd be scoring.
Yeah,
know?
I couldn't agree more. It's those small little disciplines in your life
Yeah.
that and every time I do a lot of personal coaching for guys.
Yeah.
I became a certified speaker, trainer, and coach through John Maxwell.
Nice.
And so
Yeah.
very first thing I focus on is, what's your morning routine?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have one. Well, let's have one. Well, I know, but I want to do this. I said, yes, I know, but we got to paint the fence first.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Mr.
right.
Miyagi,
Yep,
right?
yep,
here. I'm
yep,
gonna
yep.
Paint the fence. So let's start on a daily routine.
Right.
So
That's such a big deal. Let's talk about Operation Pop Smoke. And before, I really want to get your opinion on this, because as somebody
Sure.
who's dealt with PTSD, I mean, when I came back from my tour in Iraq, I lost one of my best friends over there, and went through a pretty dark depression. And the only reason I think I'm here today is because somebody knew how to reach me in that hole that I was in and pull me out. I didn't pull myself out. Somebody else, and we were talking before we went live about the mindset of somebody who deals with trauma, and how the logic, conscious part of your brain kind of turns off in that way. But, obviously PTSD has a lot to do with the trauma side, but a lot of suicides, especially in the veteran community, I think are attributed more to they lived their whole life in the military with a mission. And then they decide they don't want to do that anymore, and their brothers and sisters carry on, and they're left having just gotten off that train, and they don't know what to do. They're lost. They're feeling like they don't have a mission anymore, and their life is pointless, and they get into that dark, deep depression that brings them there. What do you think is the bigger piece? Do you think it's the physical act of going through the trauma? Like, what's really contributing to the action that's being taken that's giving us the terrible statistics that we see? I mean, you deal with this all the time. I just wanted to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually a fantastic question. So there's kind of 2 parts to that. So the first thing I'll say is that trauma is sticky.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you ever dealt with something sticky like syrup or glue
Sure.
or something like that, it just kind of sticks to everything, and anything you touch, it just kind of sticks to. And so
Yeah.
when you experience trauma, the next time you experience trauma, it sticks together.
Yeah.
And it sticks together, and it sticks together. And you have an experience with somebody that may not be traumatic, but maybe they trigger something in you that reminds you of that trauma. And so now that person automatically gets associated with that trauma, even though they had nothing to do with it and actually didn't do anything to harm you.
Yeah.
The brain categorizes them into that trauma. So trauma gets very, very sticky. And if we don't deal with it, if we don't clean off our hands, if we don't deal with that trauma, then it just continues to stick and stick and stick and stick until we completely isolate ourselves away from everybody.
It's huge.
And so what I tell people, I remind them of military battle tactics.
Yeah.
And I said, when you're having anxiety or a panic attack, to me, it feels a lot like an ambush.
Right.
Because out of nowhere, we're getting hit with these thoughts, these feelings. Our heart is racing. We're feeling out of control. We're feeling overwhelmed. That's exactly what an ambush feels like.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And so what does the enemy want to do in an ambush? They want to attack you. They want to surprise you and attack you. They want to separate you from your squad so they can overwhelm you and kill you.
Right.
That's exactly what a panic attack does.
Yeah.
Right? Because it comes out of nowhere and it hits you and it makes you isolate away from your friends and family, your support network, because you feel embarrassed or ashamed. And so you isolate away from people. And then the intrusive thoughts start coming in and there's nobody there to support you.
Yeah.
And eventually they overwhelm you and then you commit suicide.
Right.
So I teach guys that how you deal with a panic attack or with PTSD is exactly like you would an ambush.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you would do? Well, I'd return fire.
Muscle memory. Yeah. Where are we going?
I'd return fire. I said, okay, so when those negative thoughts and experiences, when that comes into your mind, you have to fight that with truth. So what's
powerful.
the truth of the situation? Yes, you feel like this parking lot, like there's somebody here, like you're going to die. You have to remind yourself, like, no, I'm in America. Hey, I'm safe. Hey, this is Safeway. The real odds of me getting hurt here are minimal.
Yeah.
Like, I'm okay. I'm just going to take a minute. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to assess my situation. There's no real threat out here. Everybody's fine. I don't see any weapons in anybody's hands. You have to bring that truth out, that this is the reality of it. Because your brain, your unconscious mind, is throwing off warning signals to your conscious mind, say, hey, we're in danger.
Yeah.
But you have to tell the subconscious, like, no, we're fine. Like, give it the information that it needs to calm down. And so that's part of it. You have to have that cognitive thought process to say, no, I'm okay, and walk yourself through it. We call it a function check.
Yeah.
And so I teach guys in the book how to do a function check. And it's actually part of the app as well, how to talk themselves down from that traumatic PTSD moment, how to talk themselves down. And so just like a weapon, when it's malfunctioning, you go through each of the systems till you found where it's malfunctioning. You repair that piece, and then you get back in the fight. And so I teach guys that same thing. And so that's the first part of it. The first thing you do is return fire. And that's basically how you do it. I go more in depth. But the second part is you would call for support, right?
Yeah.
You'd get on the hook and you'd say, hey.
We're getting shot at.
That's right. I need some air assets inbound, or I need some cover fire, or, I need another unit to come support me.
Right.
You would get on the phone. I said, so when we're being attacked in combat, would you be embarrassed to pick up that hook and say, hey, I'm getting hit. Like, I need help.
No.
You wouldn't.
Not even a thought.
Right. So why would you feel ashamed to call one of your buddies when you're dealing with PTSD? Now that we've associated it, that it's the same thing, right? The exact same thing is happening. So if you wouldn't be embarrassed to call if you're getting shot at, why would you be embarrassed when you're being bombarded with these intrusive thoughts and suicidal ideations? You wouldn't. Yeah. So I try and have them overcome that stigma by using military battle tactics.
Love it.
And so that's one of the main things that I try and do to help guys in the moment overcome those things. Now, there's a lot more that we go into in depth in the book and in the program that gives more steps for guys to do. But that's really the basics of that process right there.
Gotcha. So let's dive into Pop Smoke then. This is, I got to play with it a little bit and kind of check it out, and the aesthetics are clean. It looks like something I would use in the battlefield. Tell me, where did the idea come from? What does the app do? What are the functions?
Yeah, so Operation Pop Smoke, it started as a way for me just to better communicate with the veterans that I'm serving.
Yeah.
You know, because as we're growing and more guys are coming in, it's harder for me to touch every person and be in direct
Right.
contact with them on a regular basis because we're growing so much.
Yeah.
And so I try and raise up other leaders, but there's still this communication piece that we were missing. And so I was a communication specialist
Nice.
in the military, and then I got stationed with 1st Anglico. And so with communication is key,
Yeah.
you know, to everything. If comms are down, you're combat ineffective.
That's
You're
right.
really stuck. And so what we were dealing with is guys are going through a mental health crisis, but they're not reaching out. And so
Yeah.
I had to find out why. Like,
It's a
what
huge
is
piece. That's
yeah,
almost one of the biggest pieces.
that's right. What is happening? They're getting isolated and they're not calling for help. And I have to figure out why.
Yeah.
And so I started just talking with my guys like, hey, you've been struggling with this for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Why didn't you call me? Oh, I didn't want to bother you.
Yeah,
Or I didn't
right,
want this or
right.
that. I didn't want to be a burden. I know you're busy. All these excuses. And we tried using like a Facebook Messenger or like a text message group, but it just wasn't working because
Yeah.
guys weren't
They
reaching
still
out.
weren't reaching out.
They weren't
Yeah.
reaching out, even though we had that there, we had it set up, they weren't using it. And I had to find out why. And so I started doing a tremendous amount of study on how the brain actually operates. And what I found was more not how the brain operates, but how it fails to operate when people are going through a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
So you have two basic parts of the brain. You have your conscious and subconscious, or people call it unconscious, depending on
Right.
you know what psychologist you're talking to, right? But basically you have your frontal cortex, which is your good decision making, your long-term planning, and your ability to control impulses are all controlled with your frontal cortex. Now when you're going through a mental health crisis, that your capacity to use your frontal cortex is completely reduced.
Yeah.
So it's not that these guys don't want to, they just don't have the facilities to be able to
There's an
reach
actual
out.
reaction going on in the brain, right?
That's right. That part of the brain is shut down.
Yeah.
And so they don't, it's not that they don't want to reach out. They just can't. They don't know how.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, learning that, I went back to my guy and said, well, what if there was just a single button push that you could push and then the signal would go out to us and then we could reach out to you when
Yeah.
it was convenient to us.
Yeah.
I said, oh, that would be great because it takes away the burden,
Yeah.
takes away the shame,
Yeah.
takes away the embarrassment because you just hit a button and then like I'm in this meeting right now.
Right.
Maybe I can't get to that right now,
Right,
but I
right,
can
right.
in 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yep.
Right. And so it alleviates that stress that they feel.
Yeah.
Now, guys, when they're struggling with mental health, they struggle to reach out, like I said. So with this app, when they start to feel uneasy, there's two buttons they can push, the white smoke or the red smoke. So when they're feeling a little uneasy, maybe they woke up just feeling a little off, or they're fighting with the wife, or
Yeah.
they're starting to feel a little bit depressed, they can just push that white button and it sends an alert out to the squad that, hey, I'm mildly struggling with an issue.
Sure.
Now, if they push the red button, that's I'm homicidal, suicidal, about to use drugs or alcohol. It's dangerous.
It's serious. Yeah.
So they push that button and it sends the same alert out, but it's a red alert, and it also turns on the GPS locator on their phone.
Nice. Yeah.
And so that all of these ideas came about by me working with veterans and trying to figure out a way to be able to better communicate. So these were just kind of random ideas that I had floating around in my head. I didn't really have a solid pathway. I had to put this together or what to do. And I remember I just prayed that night because we'd gotten really close to losing one of our guys. And through phone calls and text messages, we talked to his family and found out that he was inebriated and leaving his parents' house to go to his wife's house walking. And so we literally did a grid by grid search of the city. My wife and I are in Mexico trying to coordinate two of my squad leaders on the ground, and they're doing a grid by grid search.
Right.
And they find this guy on the freeway overpass contemplating jumping.
Jeez.
And I'm not kidding you. They did a textbook snatch and grab. They
Yeah,
rolled up
right.
hard on him. One of the guys got out and literally snatched him off and threw him in the rig.
That's the right answer. Yeah.
And they took him to the VA hospital.
Yeah.
So I said, there's got to be a better way. And so I said, okay, we got to get this GPS feature. That's got to be a part. And so all these different parts were kind of floating around my head. I just remember I just prayed. Like most times I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to tell you.
Sure.
You know, and I just pray. I said, God, just show me how to make this work.
Yeah.
What do I do? And I woke up the next morning with this vision in my head, and I couldn't get rid of it, and I still can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And it was all these pieces. And so if you look at our PSA, our public service announcement for the app for Operation Pop Smoke, every element that is in that video is a vision that I had. Now I didn't see it in video format. It was more like still frames. So every one of those video, portions of video, I saw it already. Like there's little things in it that I didn't realize at the time were important, but I just put it in there. And it wasn't until the project was complete that I kind of sat back and I was like, wow, okay, now I can see it. I couldn't see it. All I saw were the little pieces, but once I was obedient and built out the video and the app the way God had showed me, then I could see the whole picture.
Yeah.
It's kind of like building a puzzle without seeing the box.
Totally.
Once you get it all put together, you're like, oh, that's what it is.
I use that analogy a lot. It's a good one.
So with that, if you look at our PSA, it's a 3-minute PSA. You can find it on YouTube or on our webpage, operationpopsmoke.com. You'll see it. It's a veteran going through his day, dealing with mental health. And so it shows him sleepless night, getting up in the morning, having flashbacks, these little triggers are popping up. All of those things I put into the video. One of the really unique things was that I didn't want any organic sound in the video at all. So all the organic sound has been completely removed. And every sound is the sound of something in the military. So the bus going by is actually a tank. When he flips the switch on the coffee pot, it's the selector switch of an AR-15.
Dang.
When he's grinding the beans, it's actually 7.62 rounds getting pulled out of a ammo box. All these different sounds are organic to military,
which is stuff that we see. So accurate too. I mean, that's what we're trained to hear. Wow.
So how everyday sounds, how they correlate to combat or military for us. And so all of those little things were in there. And then I watched the video for the first time and I was just like, wow, that's it.
That's so huge. That's so huge. One of the things that really caught my attention about the app too, you talked about losing the logic part when you're in a PTSD moment. And that's typically what prompts those suicidal thoughts. And part of your app is that functions check, which forces you to think about what are 3 things you can hear right now?
Yes.
Touch something. What can you feel? Taste something. What can you taste? It's bringing your senses back to I'm right here, right? Because in that, and I've experienced that where I'm in the U.S., but I really think I'm in Iraq.
Absolutely.
I really think that thing on the side of the road is a bomb.
Yep.
It's real.
Yes.
It's not I kind of thought. No, it's in your mind. It is real. And so how has that impacted the people who have been testing it and stuff like that? I mean, that's got to be just such a huge thing to be able to bring people back.
Yeah, it's really cool. And again, it's nothing that I created. I read a tremendous amount. I read a lot of medical journals. I read a lot of studies on how the brain works and stuff that would just completely bore other people. I find it fascinating,
Absolutely.
Right? Like how the brain operates and all these different things. And so what you are experiencing is called an amygdala hijack.
Yeah.
So there's a small little primal part of your brain that is your fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
And so that's what happens is your subconscious bombards you with the stimuli saying that you're in danger, and then your amygdala hijacks your brain, and you go to this lower form of thinking. So that's where you can't use your cognitive reasoning skills. So what happens, and I try to explain this to people are like, I don't understand what that means. It doesn't make sense.
Sure.
So I try and tell people, I said, especially here in the Northwest, right? I said, you've driven in traffic before, right?
Yeah.
And so when I do this, I do a lot of speaking engagements.
Sure.
And so I'll have the whole audience there, and I'll say, all right, so let me explain how this works. So show of hands, who here has ever driven in traffic? Everybody raises their hand, right? I said, all right, so who here has ever been frustrated? When somebody's cut them off in traffic, still everybody raises their hands. I said, okay, now show of hands. When that happens, who's ever wanted to just hit the gas and put that guy into the wall? And like 1 or 2 people like put their hand up, and I got my hand up. I said, I look around, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that feels like that, right? And the whole room starts laughing because they've all, majority of people have felt that way. They just don't want to verbalize that, right?
We don't want to be violent people, but. Yeah.
So what I tell them is, I said, okay, so that experience right there, right? We've all experienced that. But you were able to have your cognitive thought process kick in.
Yeah.
And you had good reasoning skills, long-term planning, and you were able to avoid that situation because your cognitive thought processes kicked in.
That's right.
And you were able to work through that issue and avoid that situation. I said the problem is those faculties aren't available to somebody going through a mental health crisis.
That's huge.
They're
and what
not
a
able
great
to do
analogy too, because that could happen every day.
Yeah.
It does happen every day.
It does. It
You know?
does. And so the people aren't able to process through that. They aren't able to not act on that impulse. And what we know by talking to suicide survivors, and I've watched a lot of interviews with suicide survivors, they've all regretted the attempt.
Yeah.
The moment that they commit suicide, they regret it.
Yeah.
Because they acted on that impulse.
Yeah.
And so with the app, it gives them a way out.
Yep.
So they don't have to act on that impulse.
Yeah.
Because it gives them a way out. So there was a fascinating study that was done by Johns Hopkins University, and it was about rats and how they originally wanted to see how rats, which rat could swim better, the domesticated rat or the wild rat. And what they did is they put these rats in jars. And this is the 1950s, okay? So you couldn't get away with this now. I was going to disclaimer, all right, if you're listening to this and you're a little tender-hearted.
Decades ago.
Yeah. If you're a little tender-hearted, like, maybe pause this for a minute. But they put these rats in these jars and they let them swim around until they drowned, and they timed them. Right. Well, it only took the rats about 2 minutes before they would nose around the edge, realize there was no escape, and then they would literally dive to the bottom and drown themselves and die. And so the scientists were perplexed. Like, we know they're better swimmers than this. Right. And there was no real change between the domesticated rat or the wild rat. So they went back to the drawing board and they thought, well, what can we do to change the parameters of this and get different results? So that's what they did. They brought in fresh rats and they put them in the jars and they let them swim around. Exact same results. They nosed around the edge. After 2 minutes, they dove down. But the moment they started to dive to the bottom, the scientists would rescue the rat out. They would hold it for a few minutes. They would pet the rat, let it recover, and then they would reintroduce it right back into that same jar.
Interesting.
Now, something amazing happened. Those rats would now swim for hours and sometimes even days before their body physically succumbed to exhaustion and they would drown.
Wow.
It was amazing.
It's huge.
Yeah, the scientists were blown away. And so they concluded this, that in the absence of hopelessness, the rats did not die. You see, it was that small injection of hope into the rat's life, that hope of rescue, that kept them fighting harder and longer than anyone ever expected. And it's that same hope that we give the veteran when he pushes that button, that his squad is coming for him, and he's going to fight harder and longer to stay alive.
That's huge. It's absolutely huge. Wow. It's powerful. And I'm obviously, as a vet, my mindset is one a day is too much. It's unacceptable. So everything that can be done to reduce that number is huge. And this, I think, makes big leaps and bounds. And it's so interesting to watch the government try. And we don't need to go too deep into this, but I'm very anti-veteran crisis line because it's run by a civilian contractor. How does that even make sense? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my whole life. And so I have come across other organizations that set up their own little micro call centers. And I always had the idea, like, all right, if I'm a vet and I'm dealing with PTSD and I have suicidal thoughts, I'm going to call this hotline. Even if it was a vet on the other line, but they were a Vietnam vet and I was OAF, I was in Iraq, there's still a bridge that can't be gapped there. What if when I called, the answering service asked me, what branch did you serve in and what era did you serve in? So you're connected with not just somebody who served, but somebody who's in the same theater. We're talking about multiple generations here. Like, ideologically, I have disagreements with some people who were in Vietnam, right? Just because it was a whole different generation, right? They think differently, and that's not a bad thing. But the fact that they can't even bridge the gap of the person behind the phone who's trying to help a veteran who dealt with something very micro-specific, that blows me away. And so I'm super happy to see the people who are outside of that system that are saying, you know what, we don't need that. That really doesn't work. It's not the most efficient thing out there. Let's go build something that is. That's the, by vets, for vets, I think is a really powerful thing. The other thing that I really, really liked about this app is the fact that it wasn't a global thing, right? You don't just sign up for the service and pop red smoke and all of a sudden 100 people are getting your message. That's not how it worked in the military, right? We were in squads in the military, and that was your tight little knit group. And that's how you have the app set up, right?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you transitioned to that because I was going to get ready to. So that's perfect. Exactly. So I read a study. Like I said, I read a lot.
Yeah,
right? So there's a study that the Department of the Army did. It was a 40-year-long study, and they wanted to find out why the U.S. military was so formidable on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And they literally narrowed this down to one single element, which is the squad.
Holy crap.
Because we fight in squads, and every member of the squad, they value the squad over themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're going to fight harder and longer because they don't want to let the squad down.
That's right.
And that's it. That's why. And we all know that, right? Let's say no-brainer. Right. We tell veterans that, and they're like,
sense.
"Oh yeah, of course, that makes complete sense, right?"
Right.
Like that's our family, and we would, and knowing that we value the squad over ourselves. But on the other side of that coin is that we know if we get pinned down or we get injured, that squad is going to walk through hell to get us out. 10 guys are going to run headlong into gunfire to pull one guy out because we're never going to leave a guy behind.
That's right.
And so we know that. And so by creating a squad of people that you already know and love and trust, that's how people are going to be able to overcome suicide. Yeah. And it's going to help them heal long term.
Yeah, that's right.
Because there's no accountability for the crisis line or the veteran suicide line any of these other lines. There's no accountability. People call in. They can be whoever they want to be.
Sure.
They can have whatever problem they want to have.
Yep.
And they don't ever have to change anything in their life.
That's right.
They can just continue to use that as a crutch, and they're never going to get better. Yeah. They just get stuck in this cycle.
Yeah.
And so with the app, with your friends and your family and your battle buddies, there's accountability there.
That's right.
Right? And they know you better than anybody. So just like your squad, there's that small group of people who you know and trust, and they're the ones who are going to be able to help get you to that next level of your healing. And so in the moment, we look at this when we designed it. We had to really define what was it that we were building. Yeah. What is it? And we defined it as this. We are building, we're combining military battle tactics with emerging technology to create the very first aid response for suicidal ideations.
I love it.
First aid response. So when we look at first aid, the progression of first aid in America, we look at the Heimlich maneuver, we look at the CPR and the AED system.
Yep.
And those systems are designed to keep somebody alive in the moment.
That's right.
But if I have a heart attack, you guys hopefully know CPR, and you're going to give me CPR, right?
Yep.
And then you don't just send me on my way. I say, all right, man, have a good day. No.
Glad you're all right, man.
No, you take me to the hospital.
That's right.
I get an EKG.
Yep.
They run a bunch of tests on me. I see a cardiologist. Yep. He gives me a treatment plan, and then I have to follow up with that treatment plan.
That's right.
And that's successful at treating people with heart conditions.
That's right.
So why aren't we using that same process when it comes to suicide?
Couldn't agree more.
We don't. Somebody feels suicidal, we take them to the ER, and that's it.
Yeah.
They feel better for the day, and then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, same problem. It's this revolving door. I didn't create anything new. I just said, hey, this system works. Let's try this.
Right.
It's already working.
It's the same mentality behind, you talk about bringing battle tactics into different things. I do that for my company, and I know a lot of other vets that start their own businesses or they're high-level, executives in another company that they're deploying psychological operations.
Yep.
They're deploying 90% preparation, 10% execution. They're deploying adapt and overcome. These are all things that we learned when bullets were flying overhead. It's a much different context there. And I'm glad there's not bullets flying overhead anymore, right? That's not a bad thing. But the core ideology that made us successful in that combat zone absolutely apply here, not just to business, to everything. Right?
Absolutely. I tell people that when you think about a mental wound, it's hard to visualize, like, what is that?
Yeah.
Well, let's just treat it like we would a physical wound.
Yeah.
Right? Let's apply those same processes, and we're going to have success. And we've had great success with it.
Absolutely.
So with the app, you can't make everybody happy, especially in the veteran community, right? There's always going to be haters out there. And trust me,
always.
I've got some haters.
Sure.
And you know who you are, and you're listening right now because that's how you hate on me, because you follow me around.
That's right. Ironic, isn't it?
It is. But they... they say, oh, well, this, it should be, you push the button and anybody can respond. Well, there's no accountability there.
That's right.
That's not how this was designed.
Yep.
I have to walk in obedience to the way that God showed me that this is going to work.
Well,
it's not
and
my
logic,
idea.
too. It's like we have we have medical data backing this up here. Where's your evidence? You know,
Right.
That's
So that's the issue that I've overcome. And people say, well, I don't have anybody. Well, everybody has somebody. Right. You have somebody in your family. I don't believe that at all. And the other part of it is, if you really don't have somebody, then go join one of these veteran service organizations.
Oh, there's so many.
Because I'm trying to partner right now with organizations that serve veterans. Where I've been talking to the VFW, I've been talking to AMVETS, American Legion, Team Rubicon. Some of these other large organizations that serve veterans. They can use this. Because the app is super powerful in the hands of the squad.
Absolutely.
But it's even more powerful in the hands of the organization.
Sure.
Because they have a lot more manpower and resources to be able to support that veteran. Right? Because once they get him through that crisis moment, now they have to execute the plan.
Now there's resources that need to come to the table. And
That's
absolutely.
right. And the organization has a lot more access to those resources than the individual squad does.
100%.
And so that's why it's so much more powerful in the hands of an organization. And one of the other things that's really cool for an organization is that we'll be able to capture all the metadata. Now, no chat data, nothing like that. Like that's stored only on your phone, not even on our servers. We've specifically designed it like that. And after 7 days, it auto deletes. So even if the federal government sent me a subpoena, by the time I answered to it, your data's gone. So they'd have to subpoena your phone.
Good.
Right?
Smart man.
So trust me, I've put a lot of thought into this.
Right.
But the really cool thing for an organization is that we'll be able to capture metadata, right, and see how many people are pushing, when are they pushing, how long is it taking people to respond.
How's the app being used?
I can capture that and I can look at it, and it doesn't on a day-to-day. It doesn't make any sense.
But trends will show themselves always.
See,
the numbers don't lie.
You're a business owner, and so you get it, right?
Yep.
And so I can look at 12 months worth of data, and I can say, wow, VFW post whatever. In February, you've had a huge number, a spike in usage. Like, let's find out why. So go talk to your guys. Maybe you've got a bunch of guys that came back from deployment during that time. Maybe they all experienced some sort of trauma during that time. And so now you can get out ahead of these things, and instead of being reactive to a situation, you can be proactive to it.
Preach.
And you can bring in resources for them. You can maybe put together a barbecue. You can bring in a mental health specialist. Whatever you need, whatever that commander needs, or that organization, whatever you think is going to fit there.
Absolutely.
It gives you the power to see that and be proactive instead of reactive to the situation. Like G.I. Joe says, man, knowing's half the battle, right? And so if I can give you that data, you know where your hot spots are, and you can get out ahead of those things, which is going to be incredibly powerful when we look at this at an organizational level. So I'm really trying to push organizations to sign on to this program and make it available to every one of their veterans completely free of charge.
This thought just popped into my mind. How much thought have you given towards pushing this towards active duty?
Not a whole lot, honestly, because I'm really focused on the veteran community.
Of course,
However, I already know that there are applications there.
Right.
But the veterans, that's where I have to get my data, right? That's where I have to get my.
It's got to start somewhere. Yeah.
So since you mentioned that, I'll tell you about this section that we're already looking into. So there's the active duty side. There's first responders, and then the general civilian population. And so we're already how would I say it? We're already creating apps for those demographics.
Like different versions of it.
It's the same version, just the look and the feel are going to be different.
Probably the terminology being, slightly different,
right? You remember the old Nokia brick phone?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Where you could pop the faceplate off and put a new cool one on.
I love those phones. I wish I still had one.
That is exactly what we're doing to the app.
I love it.
So the functionality will be the same. We won't call it pop smoke because that doesn't mean anything to a 12-year-old girl. Right? But we'll create terminology. We've already done our focus group for first responders to create their version. We have mock-ups done. And here in a couple weeks, I'll be presenting that to Seattle PD because I'd like for them to be one of the first police departments in the country.
Absolutely.
One of the guys who's gone through my program, Chris Safrenic, he was Officer of the Year a couple years ago, and now he's on peer support team, and so he's taken me to a couple mental health conferences that the police department has put on, and so they're very excited about something like this coming out.
It's huge.
And
there's nothing else like it.
There's not. And so getting that in the hands of these guys is going to be amazing. And one of the things I think that we'll see is that once this app gets out and it starts getting used here in the Northwest, our police departments are going to have a reduction in the amount of suicidal veteran calls that they experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's going to be by proxy of the app. Because
and it's also such a big issue for that demographic as well. Vets, military personnel are not the only people who have a large. I mean, I think we're kind of the front runners here, which I'm not real proud of, but there are a lot of different demographics that have some pretty serious PTSD related suicide numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, just in our community here, I mean, we just had an officer commit suicide a couple months ago. Seattle PD. We have firefighters. EMTs. Dispatch. I didn't realize this, but dispatch has a huge problem because they hear all of these things.
Yeah, they're hearing it live.
But they never get to see what the result is.
Yeah.
So they get all of this work up, but they don't get to know what happened after that.
Super rough.
ER nurses.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. There's a hospital that saw what we were doing with the veteran side, and they reached out to us. They're from North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they reached out to us and said, hey, we'd like to have you come out and speak and tell us about this app, and are there civilian implications? And we said, yeah, absolutely. So we went out. I met with them. Spent a few days with those guys, briefed their mental health department, their directors, and then I did kind of like a community forum as well.
Nice.
And then I didn't hear from them. And I want to say it was Thursday or Friday, they called and said, hey, we're really interested. We have a venture group that's part of our hospital.
Yeah.
They go out and try and find new products and services. And so what they're looking at is how do we take this technology and use it at the ER level.
Absolutely.
So when people come in and they're having these suicidal ideations, they can now give them a tool that they can walk out the door with to help them prevent suicide. And so here's a really crazy thing, and I didn't know this, but I learned it along the way, that when the insurance companies now, when somebody goes to the emergency room, the ED, for suicidal ideations, and then they get sent home, if they commit suicide within 30 days of that initial treatment at the hospital, that hospital does not get reimbursement for any of that treatment.
Whoa.
So now there's a monetary goal for these hospitals to implement something like this.
Which is good.
It
sounds like a positive move.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's so that's one of the things that we're working with this venture group is how do we market this? How do we take this idea and market it to emergency rooms to give them a tool to help guys. And so when you talk about is this available for active duty, we're trying to get into all these different demographics. I'd love to sit down and have a meeting like this with the Surgeon General and say, hey, let's roll this out, as a national program. That's one of my goals.
Well, and I think for me as a business owner, when you're launching a new product, really keeping your finger on the pulse and watching the numbers and seeing where it goes. I've had projects that I was very cemented. I knew exactly where they were going, and then 20% in the project were pivoting and moving in a different, better direction that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's very exciting, and I think it's going to be fun to watch kind of where it goes, because there is so much civilian application, there's so much military application, there's so much first responder application, and we need stuff like this. We need stuff that's actually going to move the needle, not just a pamphlet, not just a phone call, not just the stuff that's out there. I feel is vanity in so many different ways, and this, I don't think there's any question, is going to move the needle. It's huge.
Yeah, it became very real. I've had a lot of pushback from the academic community, with doctors and different mental health people. They just dismiss me. I'm just
academics, man.
I'm a janitor, right?
Yeah,
I'm a janitor.
right.
So, and I get it, right? Like, they've spent their career studying this stuff, but they have no direct application for it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's funny, I talked to the venture group and I said, hey guys, if I wasn't, I'm going to ask you some questions now, right? Because this was like a Shark Tank type deal. Right. I said, well, let me ask you some questions. And they're like, okay. And so one of the questions I asked was, if I wasn't part of this, right? If this wasn't my app, if this, you guys had developed this internally, and it was yours 100%, what would you guys be doing with it?
Super good question. Yeah.
And the CEO was very direct. He said, we'd be doing absolutely nothing with it.
Whoa.
I said, I was shocked by that answer, right?
Yeah, right.
I said, well, what do you mean? He says, if the academics built this thing,
Yeah.
it would go nowhere.
Yep.
We've built multiple apps. They're too clinical.
Yeah.
People don't respond to it. They don't interact.
not real.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
He said, we need somebody like you who's been there, who's walked through the trenches and can lead other people through it. He said, we don't want to take over this app. We just want to help you make it as big as we can.
Oh, that's huge.
And I was kind of taken aback by that. Because here I was waiting for them to say, oh, we'd take it and we'd monetize it this way, we'd monetize it that way, and all this stuff.
A typical venture capital group.
But they said, no, we couldn't do it because you have the passion, you understand it, you need to lead the charge. And I was just like, wow, okay. That gave me a lot of confidence in working with them. Because here's not some group that wants to just take this thing that we created and prostitute it out there, basically.
It's so good to see the self-awareness on that level, though. It's rare. I don't see a lot of that because there is such a massive delta between academic thought process, which has its legitimate points of view, and real life. Mm-hmm. The difference between book smart and street smart is pretty big.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have different applications, and I couldn't agree with that more. I think his answer could not have been more dead on. Like, yeah, you're right. If we would have taken this on, it wouldn't have gone anywhere because it would have felt like it was built by the hospital, not by somebody who actually has lived it and gone through it. Wow. So we've talked about where you came from, what you're up to. What's on the horizon? What are the new projects and task force and operations that you're working on? I also heard that you're going to DC in early December. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the crazy ideas I had was so when I was developing this app and I was trying to get the word out there, I would go panhandle. Like seriously, I'd be the guy on the side of the road, but I wouldn't take donations. I would just there with my sign, ask me how to end veteran suicide, and I'd give them a flyer about what we were doing, and that's how I beefed up our social media.
I love it.
A lot was just going out where all the panhandlers were, and I would never take money.
Yep.
So if you see somebody out there for Q missions or Pop Smoke asking for money, do not give them.
Us,
we don't do it. We have events where we do that, or you can give online, but we don't take cash. So I did a lot of that, and I'm thinking like, how can I get this on the national stage? How can I get this literally on the national stage where national news is picking it up? I do a lot of local news stuff, but get this out there because the app is ready to launch here in December. It's like it's ready to go, and so people will be able to download it. We've had some setbacks, with trying to integrate
software
these different
development
things.
is hard, man. Yeah,
man, it's so tough.
Yep.
So I when it's ready, my idea was to fly out to DC with my signs that say, help me end veteran suicide. Another one that says, which I think it says, mercenary needs weapons to battle suicide or something like that. It's crazy signs, right?
Yeah.
And I thought about just taking that and walking through, the halls of the Senate and the Congress and out in front of the White House and just seeing what happens. I'm that kind of guy.
Amazing.
Like I'll just go and I'll do it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And try and stir up some excitement there. I know that they have this veterans coalition that they have to end suicide. And I've tried to make calls and find out who's on it, who do I talk to, what are they doing with it, and they haven't really done anything. It's something that the president said needs to happen, needs to be created, but so far nobody even knows like who's on the panel, who's on the board, who's doing it. They have come out recently and said, we're going to give $750,000 to organizations that provide suicide prevention.
Sure.
Right? But why who can claim that, right? Like anybody could claim that they do suicide prevention. So what's the parameters?
Really mean?
Like where are the parameters for that? How do you apply for that money? None of that stuff has come out at all. All they do is they feed us these little taglines that look good on the news, but there's no pathway to get to that money.
Really
there's no pathway to get to those things.
There's so much of that these days. It really drives me crazy. We just shared a story about a veteran organization in Washington that got taken over by the state because they were siphoning money. And it was run by a vet. What? Man. You got to be kidding me. Like, we're trying to tackle serious issues and save people's lives, and you're paying your rent with donation money?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
What?
So
it's not okay. But you're absolutely right. Like, I could not see a more need for accountability in this sector because anybody can claim a charity. And the way that I see a lot of charities being run is as businesses that The profit's just in the background.
So
right?
here's what I want to say. I want to make a really clear delineation here.
Yeah.
That there's Q Missions, which is all my ministry work,
Right.
and it's where we won all of those awards. And so when we were designing Pop Smoke originally, we tried to raise money through commissions. We tried to raise support, even in the veteran community. Like, hey, help me build this app.
Right.
We had a GoFundMe. I had a Kickstarter campaign.
Yep.
I got like less than $1,500. Like nobody was interested, and I was just like, "Well, that's terrible."
Yeah, that's
right. I have this idea, but I can't get it funded.
Right.
And so we decided to take it out of the nonprofit sector
Yeah.
and build it as an LLC.
Yeah.
Because I have both. I have a janitorial company.
Right.
I employ about 90 people here in the Puget Sound.
That's huge.
So I understand business.
Yeah, right.
Nonprofit is definitely more difficult for me.
It really is. Yeah.
I run an award-winning nonprofit. I would much rather do the business side, right?
Yeah,
Because I understand it. So when we designed it as an LLC.
Right.
So there's a lot of people from Q Missions, my alumni, who are working on the project. And we're all working for free right now because there's no revenue for this thing.
Yep.
And so how we design it as an LLC, a limited liability corporation. Yep. And so what we are is we are a technology company that's building apps to prevent suicide.
I think that's such a smart way to do it, though, man.
It has to become sustainable.
That's right.
Because I can't rely on donations. I can't rely on, some donors' feelings about, now I'm going to, give money to...
You said something on Twitter that I don't like. I'm not giving you money anymore.
Right. Something like this has to be self-sustainable because it's got to have longevity.
Yeah.
That's the only way it's going to work.
Just hit the nail on the head, man.
So when we looked at price points, I looked at similar apps that were out there in the community, accountability apps, accountability software that people have through churches and work and stuff like that. And they're going between $6 and $8 a month per subscription. Sure. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So we crunched the numbers and we got it down to $1.25 a month. $1.25 a month. So it's like $15 a year for this app. And that will... the app stores take a tremendous amount. Yeah, they do. But basically, if I can get to 90,000 users, that's when we become income neutral. Nice. And that's when I can actually start paying the staff that's working for free right now. Yep. But that's what we're looking at. There's 18.2 million veterans in America. And if I can gain like less than 1% of that market share, then the app becomes self-sustainable. And I get a tremendous amount of pushback from the veteran community saying, it should be free. You shouldn't be charging. You're making money off the backs of struggling veterans. And I'm like, well, I didn't see you put up $80,000, buddy, to build this thing out. Like
That's
me,
so true.
Like me and a couple of my other business owner friends who are veterans, like we ponied up the money to build this thing out. Where were you when I was running the...
Well, and I also want people behind the scenes that's their full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're putting their attention and their time and their sweat into it because that's where they have to be. But also that's where they want to be, right? There's a big difference between somebody who goes and clocks in and out of a W-2 job and hates their life.
Right.
I always thought that about the veteran crisis line too. Like if we were to take that government contract over, how many vets would we get to put to work and give back to the veteran community all at the same time? Like it's a double win all day long. That's why I love running a veteran-owned business. Every position I open, I'm like, I get to put another veteran in here who gets to give back to their community and become a part of a new mission.
So there's a really cool thing that we did on the app because there's a 5-minute ticker. If you push the red button and your squad does not answer up, it automatically pops up to our failsafe, which is Vets for Warriors. Oh, okay. And so it's General Graham out of Rutgers University. Yeah. That's where they run it. It's called Vets for Warriors, and it's a combat line just like you're talking about, run just by veterans. And so
solid.
It defaults to them. So if your squad doesn't answer up in the 5 minutes, it'll automatically pop up a window and it'll say, looks like squad chat is going slow today. Would you like to contact Vets for Warriors? Yeah. So you click that button and you're instantly calling. Yeah. It turns on your dialer and now you're talking to the Vets for Warriors guys. And they have a chat feature too on their webpage. And so that's one of the things we're looking at is how do we integrate that chat feature into ours where they can either do the phone call or do the chat with Vets for Warriors. So that's something that we're going to look at in phase 2. Right. But we have that. It's like our reserve parachute, right? Right. You hope you don't got to use it, but it's there in case you do. There, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. I always like to talk hypotheticals, right? I'm a big whiteboard, brainstorm kind of a guy. I like to throw up ideas on the wall. If you had all the money in the world, all the time in the world, what would you build? what would be your passion project that says this thing is going to move the needle the most? And it doesn't have to be in the veteran space, just period. Like, you know, for people like us who that's all we want to do is give back, you know, we're limited by our resources. What if you didn't have any limitations? What would Aaron Q do?
I'd be doing this right here.
You'd be doing this.
This is exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be doing it as fast as I could.
Yeah.
You know, because every single day that this app isn't out there, we're losing more guys.
God, it's so true.
And
Every
so,
day.
Every day that we are stalled out on this project, every day that we can't get it out because, you know, there's a problem with the AWS server they've changed this parameter. Because the techs that are building it, they're doing the best they can. Sure. But this stuff is fluid. It changes all the time. And so every day we're losing more guys and more guys and more guys and more guys. So I'm doing it. This is what God called me to. And this is what I'm doing. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Absolutely. I looked at being retired at 40.
What's retired?
Which was this year. This year I turned 40.
Congrats.
My wife and I planned on retiring. Yeah. But God called me to this work. And so we cashed in our retirement to do this. So this is what I do. This is it. This is all my chips are on the table.
That's amazing.
And so I put everything I have into this, and then just continue to serve veterans. Like, this app is great, and it helps them in the moment, which is needed.
Right. It's just one slice of the pie.
We'll take that revenue that if we ever make revenue on this, we'll take that and put it right back into the ministry, which is where I started, which was helping guys overcome PTSD. Yeah. And so the app, with my program, it works. It helps a lot of guys. But you know what? There's a lot of great programs that help a lot of guys. Yep. And QMissions is in direct competition with them. Sure. Right? For resources and for veterans and donations. And so that's just the nature of the beast. That's just how it is. And so people say, oh, there's no competition. Yes, there is competition. Sure is. Trust me. I'm in it every day. And there's not a lot of collaboration because they kind of want to protect, you know, what they have and the program that they have that works. And I understand that, and that's great. And I want their program to work because mine doesn't work for everybody. Sure. We're all different, right? And so with this app, though, this app is a tool that anybody could add to their program, and it increases their capability. It becomes a force multiplier. Just another tool in the toolbox. Force multiplier, man. Yeah. So that's so huge. So that's what I'm doing. I'm building this tool not just for my organization, which was very small-minded in the beginning. And thanks to Tony Dayton, you know, he inspired me to build this out for everybody. That's amazing. And so here we are, man. We're doing it. Shout out to Tony Dayton. That's right. That's right. I'm literally living the dream right now. Tony's actually part of Operation Pop Smoke. He's the VP. Nice. Okay. And so he's got his hands in a lot of different things. Yeah, I told him. I said, if you want me to build this out, then you're coming with me. Otherwise, I'm not doing it.
You don't just get to give the idea.
That's right.
I love that, though. I love that. Let's zoom in a little bit. Obviously, you know, this podcast is centered around the Puget Sound. I'm curious, you know, how long have you been in the area, and what influences have you really seen come out of the Puget Sound? What's kind of influenced you to be in this area?
My church, honestly. Okay. I got a fantastic church that keeps me pretty grounded here and centered here in the Northwest. I grew up in the mountains in Northern California. Right. So the Northwest has always been my home. I've lived in Oregon, on Coos Bay. I've lived in Portland.
Love Portland.
Well, yeah. I don't know. I don't love to live there,
space,
but I love to visit it.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, I live right now in Ravensdale.
Okay.
And so it's in the woods. I live on the top of a mountain. Oh, and so there's only three homes that live up there, or 4 homes up there. Yeah. And 3 of us are Marines. Nice. It's a true story. True story. So we own the mountain.
Got a compound up there.
We kind of do. It's just, you know, we each have 5-acre plots, and I live out in the woods and in the wilderness, and that's where I grew up, man. Yeah. And so that's what feels like home to me. I mean, I travel all over the world.
Of course.
All over the world.
Well, you've seen so many different cultures.
I have. Yeah. But the Northwest, I mean, there's something about going through, taking a walk through the woods right after it's rained and that damp rain, and you can smell the earth, you know, and your footsteps are silent, so you get to see a lot more of nature because they're out too, and, you know, they're not startled as easy. And so you get to see some of the most amazing views ever here with the mountains that you just don't get to see anywhere else. Right. So and the fishing up here, I'm telling you. Oh yeah. Fishing is second to none. Yeah. I do a lot of fishing. So.
Did you ever pick up another boat?
I did.
You did? I did. Nice.
Oh my gosh.
I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah.
So there's a great organization called Boating for Heroes.
Yeah.
And they're run out of Enumclaw Post, 1949. Okay. So the Keith Mathers, he's the founder of Boating for Heroes, and so he bought a boat and he takes veterans out fishing. That's what he does. And it's not really about the fishing; it's about the
That's right.
camaraderie,
Yeah.
right? And getting them
Well,
out.
I mean, the fish is nice though.
Yes.
I've been on the Salmon for Soldiers run a couple of times. and
Okay, so they're
I-
part of Salmon for Soldiers.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So they're
That's a great organization. We took 2 World War II vets out for their last fishing trip out in Nia Bay.
yeah, that's fantastic.
That was 2017, I think, and that was some of the most fun I've ever had. Like the stories and the insight that those guys had, and just watching their face. I mean, just watching them pull up fish that's all they wanted.
Yeah.
Out of their whole life, they're like, I just want to go on a fishing trip.
Yep.
Well, we're gonna take you. It was one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. It was very cool.
Boating for Heroes. I'd been out fishing with Keith a couple times
Yeah.
and brought some of my guys from my organization and done Salmon for Soldiers, you know, for a couple years. And then he called me up one day and said, "Hey, man, I'd like to have lunch with you." I said, "Okay, we'll have lunch," and figured to talk about, you know, the coming season and stuff like that. And so each boat captain, they own their own boat,
Right.
and then they just become part of Boating for
Yeah,
Heroes.
right.
And so he asked me, he's like, "Hey, one of our captains is retiring. You know, we need a captain. You know, would you like to take over his boat?" And I said to Keith, "I can't, man. I don't have the money for that. It's a $100,000 boat. You know, I'm like, I just
Those are so nice. Too,
yeah. So you see what I do here.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
I can't afford to do that." And he says, "Yeah, we know. We all talked about it, and we decided just to donate the boat to you."
Whoa, nice.
I was blown.
That's
away.
amazing. Yeah, that's huge.
My old boat was like $16,000.
Sure,
right?
yeah,
like,
right.
it was a nice boat, but
Yeah.
not compared to this thing.
Yeah, right.
And I was shocked, and I was just like, I can't. I said, "No, I can't do it. I'm sorry."
Wow.
And he was just kind of taken aback, like, "What?"
I was not expecting that answer.
And I said, "Look, I gotta go pray about it, man."
Yeah.
I said, because just because it's a good thing doesn't mean it's a God thing. And I could see very easily where I would just neglect the ministry and just go, "Oh, okay, I'm going fishing. I got this fishing thing.
right.
This is what I'm doing." And it's a good thing, doesn't mean it's a God thing. So I really did. I went to church and I prayed about it. And what God showed me was that I have a huge organization. I don't have to be the one taking guys out all the time.
Yeah.
And so I just asked some of my guys, and they're like, "Yeah," because a lot of guys go to the church.
Of course.
So yeah, we'd love to help you out with that.
Yeah.
So I went back and told Keith, like, "Yeah, man, I'll take the boat." And here we are. So my first season with the boat, I took it up for Salmon for Soldiers.
Yep.
And so it was really cool because some of the guys that I went fishing with on my very first trip were there at Salmon for Soldiers.
So cool.
And I'm now captaining my own boat.
So cool.
And so it was amazing experience.
That's really fantastic, man. No, those are great organization.
Yeah. God's amazing. You know, I gave up that boat, never expecting anything back in
Right.
return. And here we are, you know, 4 years later, and he gives me this
how that works.
amazing boat that I could never afford.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I could never afford to buy. And it was just gifted to me through this organization with two caveats. You know, one, that I can't sell it.
Right.
And two, that I have to take veterans out fishing.
Yeah,
so not
right.
a lot of parameters on me.
Oh, no. That sounds terrible. Yeah. Wow. Well, as we kind of wrap this up, what one piece of insight would you like to give to the audience? What one inspiration can you give? If you had 50,000 people watching this right now, I mean, what message do you want to get across to the people?
I would tell them this, that PTSD, it's a daily battle. And some days you win, some days you lose, but every day you fight.
Yeah. That's a really good mentality to have. And I think there are a lot of people who just, this is just a thing that I deal with, and they don't realize the battle, the real battle. I mean, you and I can picture engagement, right? Being engaged in a combat scenario. We've been there.
Absolutely.
People outside of it struggle to see it because they've never been there. It's the same reason why I'll never call the Veteran Crisis Line.
Right.
I can't bridge that gap with those people. Right. So, Aaron, I really appreciate you being on the show. We're going to put all of your socials and stuff in the description. So if you want to reach out to Aaron, have any questions, you want to check out the apps or the book, get the book pre-ordered, right?
Yeah, there's pre-sale.
Yeah,
pre-sale
we can
right
pre-sale the book. So we'll definitely get that link on there. Anything else you want to give
I'd
to
say,
the people?
Yeah, I'd say check out OperationPopSmoke.com.
Yes, yeah.
You can follow us on Facebook as well. See the progression of the app. You can, purchase it. it's a great gift to give to a friend or family member.
Tool for the toolbox.
Absolutely.
In a very serious way.
And so one thing I did want to leave with is our next Operation Restore Hope mission is in May on Memorial Day weekend.
Nice. Okay.
So I'd like to extend that invitation to you.
Absolutely.
To come with us.
Sounds like a blast.
And get to experience it.
Where's it going to be?
So we go to Mexico,
Nice.
Rosarito.
Okay.
So you'll need a passport or passport card.
Yeah.
And then it's 4 days total, 2 days of travel, 2 days of build.
Yep.
And so we fly into San Diego, then we'll motor across the
Nice.
border. We'll
Yep.
spend 2 days building a house, and then we'll come back.
That sounds awesome. I'm in.
All right,
Yeah,
fantastic.
count me in, man.
All right,
Hey,
sounds
thanks again for doing this, man. Super great to chat.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll see you on the next one.